As I approach the end of the 5th month of being retired, I'm reflecting on what being retired looks and feels like versus what I thought it was going to be like before I actually got here. There have been a few things that I'm really glad that various people shared with me, so I wanted to share them with you. Let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Andre. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. And if you're returning, as always, thank you so much for coming back. Truly, truly appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. I broke this down into 5 things that I wish or that I'm really happy that were shared with me as I approached retirement. So let's get into them. All right. Number 1, get your financial life in order. That is finances, savings accounts, investments, eliminating debt, because debt can be a serious drag on having a nice, comfortable, successful retirement. I'm just going to be going through a number of points here, so kind of stick with me, please. Do not borrow money from your retirement accounts. I know a lot of companies have made it really easy to say, oh, I'm going to take a loan against my 401k, whatever. But that has 2 different possibilities of introducing problems for you. If for some reason you separate from the company before you've paid the loan back, that loan becomes due immediately. And if it isn't paid back, it is then treated as a withdrawal. So you typically have a penalty that you're going to pay on that. But also, more importantly, that money is no longer in your retirement account growing for your future retirement. So do not borrow money from your retirement accounts. If you have outstanding loans, pay them back. Get them done. As you're getting ready for retirement, you want to not have a lot of debt. And so that includes any loans that are outstanding. Do your best to get them paid off or at least brought seriously down before you get to retirement. Bulk up your IRA and 401k contributions, HSA, and so on. This is when you should be maximizing those if you don't already. So whatever the limits are that you qualify for in your pay grade and et cetera, do your best to bulk all that money in there so that you have it later on when you actually retire. Okay, I talked about an HSA. So consider an HSA account, so HSA, health savings account, for something that you can use in the future. I have a whole other video on that, and I will link it down below. Look at initial end-of-life planning. All of us have an expiration date, so things like your will, if you decide to use a trust to transfer assets to descendants later on, healthcare directives, anything like that. Begin to think about them. You don't necessarily have to do them if you haven't already done them right now, but they should be on your radar, things that you want to do as you go forward and be concerned about. Start thinking about your Social Security and Medicare decisions. When are you planning to take Social Security? Because that really involves all of the planning that you do for your finances. If you plan to take it earlier, then that's going to be less of a drag on your portfolio, but it is also going to be less money that you're going to get. If you plan to take it later, then you have to get more funds to be used from other sources, savings, 401k, IRA, etc. But the other side of that is that you then qualify for a larger Social Security benefit later on. Medicare, if you're retiring early, Medicare doesn't kick in until 65. So if you're retiring at 60, let's say, how are you going to get health care from now till then? I have another video on that. I'm also going to link below. Plan your anticipated income streams. IRA, 401k, savings, pension, inheritance. Anything that you've got where you're talking about, hey, I am going to be relying on this money to fund my retirement, you really have to start planning for that. And a very major part of that plan is tax consequences. How are you going to withdraw money to then say, hey, I'm going to minimize the tax that I am paying here, so therefore to be able to maximize the amount of money that I keep under my control that I have the ability to then use to fund my retirement. Think about your housing situation. A lot of people move when they retire to a different state with a lower cost of living, or even if they stay in the same state, to a smaller house. We had this really large house when we were raising our kids and so on, but now it's just the 2 of us or just me by myself. And, I don't need a 5-bedroom house. I can get down to a 2-bedroom or maybe even a 1-bedroom house. So begin to think about what is your housing situation going to be. Are you planning to continue working in a lower paying job? A lot of folks, they leave the big corporate job that they've been in, making whatever kind of money, but then they take on a much smaller job, making less money, but just something to keep the mind busy or to provide a little extra income. You're a barista at a coffee shop or a seller at a bookstore, a greeter at Walmart, anything that's, not providing a whole ton of income. So you're not trying to replace the income that you had been making before, but you are now looking at, hey, just some additional supplemental income to kind of just help grease the wheels for a more solid retirement. Make sure you have a budget. How are you planning to spend your money, overall? I'm allocating this much for housing expenses, for car expenses, gas bill, electric bill, and so on. Doesn't have to be down to the dollar, but you should have a general idea of, hey, I am going to allocate this much of the available funds that I have for each of these expenses, including things like travel, eating out, whatever it is that you might be doing. You want to have a general idea of how much money you're going to spend in each of those categories. Make sure you have an emergency fund. A lot of people, their emergency fund is their next paycheck. But in retirement, when you don't have that paycheck coming in anymore, you need to have some bucket of money that you can turn to when, the AC unit in your house decides that it's had enough and stops working, or your car, has some kind of repair that you didn't anticipate, but boom, here it is, and you've got to deal with it. Whatever those might be, make sure you have a pot of money somewhere that you can turn to be able to, iron out those bumps in the road. And then finally, we're still in tip 1 here. Get professional advice if you find that you need it. There are lots of professionals, CFPs, certified financial planners, and lots of different folks that are out there, and their job is to help you plan your retirement. If you feel that a lot of this is overwhelming, no harm, no foul in hiring a professional to help you plan out your retirement. They can be a little expensive, but oftentimes they save you more money than they cost, so definitely something to kind of keep top of mind if you find that you need that. All right, that was a lot of information. Refers to a number of videos I've done before. I'm going to link those all down below, but this is definitely stuff that I'm really happy that somebody brought to my attention before I got to retirement and that I am enjoying now that I am in retirement. Number 2, set your expectations. What do you want to accomplish in retirement? Do you want to undertake that, hey, I want to write the great American novel that I always meant to get to. I want to learn to swim. I want to, backpack through Machu Picchu. Whatever it might be, what are your expectations for, what you want to accomplish in retirement? Most of those things cost some kind of money. So you want to make sure that you have planning for the amount of money to be able to accomplish those goals. You're certainly going to have enough time typically in retirement. Wow, this is great. I've got all these free days and so on. But what are you going to do with those free days? Many of us hopefully are not just going to sit around on the couch and watch TV all day, and not really do anything. We want to get out there and do our best to actually enjoy our retirement. So make sure you set your expectations highly there. What would a typical day look like? My day, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to the senior center and do a Tai Chi class, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to have lunch with friends, and then in the afternoon I'm going to go volunteer to read to third graders, on Mondays and Wednesdays, whatever it might be. Have a plan. Have an idea of what your day is going to look like so that you can say, yep, I'm hitting that goal. I'm actually accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish there. If you just kind of wait for the day to present itself, oftentimes may find you're not doing anything. Let's see what comes up tomorrow. And then nothing comes up tomorrow, and you get to the end of tomorrow and you didn't actually do anything. The world is yours now. You can do whatever you would like in retirement. What hobbies and interests do you have? Something I always meant to get to, or something that I had been getting to, but I just didn't have the time to devote to it the way that I wanted to. Now I have the time. I've got the capabilities to be able to focus on those things, whether it be, coin collecting, working on cars, learning a new skill. I always wanted to learn underwater basket weaving, or whatever it might be. please, now is the time to take it, to be able to do that. And what are you going to do with all that free time that you have? You know, that's one of the phenomenal things that I have enjoyed really about retirement is I can do basically whatever I want. We want to go do something. I don't even need to check what day is it. You know, you want to go do this on Thursday? Sure, let's do it on Thursday because I don't have to worry about, I have work obligations, I have things that I've got to do. Now, I say that a little bit, you know, I do talk about where you've got to keep track of your medical appointments and obviously if you've committed to working at a part-time job or, you know, tutoring or whatever have you. But for the most part, my days are free and I can do whatever I would like. It's absolutely awesome. Number 3. Pay attention to your relationships. Number 1, if you have a spouse or partner, pay attention to them. My wife and I retired at the same time, but oftentimes, you know, you have one partner who's retired and the other who isn't yet. Well, the retired partner, you know, might be kind of, I don't know what to do. My partner isn't here, isn't available to me. Or if you have one person who's been retired for a while and then the second person retires and all of a sudden is upsetting their rhythm that they are accustomed to. Pay attention to your spouse or partner and make sure that you work out something that's going to work best for the both of you. Replacing work relationships that you've had for years. If you've been working at the same company for 10 years and you have, you know, a number of people that you have lunch with or that you hang out with or you go to happy hour with or whatever have you, all of a sudden you retire and those relationships just start to wane. You know, I used to talk to this person, you know, 6-7 times a day. Now we talk once a week maybe, then a couple months later we exchange a text every, you know, month or so. And then a year in, you're like, wow, I haven't talked to such and such in 3 or 4 months. You know, make sure you've got something to replace that need for you know, human interaction with other folks that you can interact with that are no longer part of your circle that you're interacting with all the time. Prioritize friends and family. Especially if your friends are retired, that's great. You know, you now have time to do a lot of things together. But if they are not retired and you're just kind of on your own, or family members, you know, now's the time. You have the ability to really focus on getting yourself involved in and paying attention to people that you may have ignored a bit when you were always busy with work. Oh, I got to do this. I don't have time. I'm really tired from working. Now, hopefully, you're no longer so caught up in work. You have the ability to really focus on family and friends. And establish a support network. You know, build a group of people that you interact with for whatever, you know, things that might be of, you know, interest to you. Hey, you know, I know that Joe knows how to do electrical stuff. So I'm really building my relationship with Joe. So if I need some electrical stuff, I can rely on Joe. And I'm a computer whiz. So when Joe needs some assistance, he can get in touch with me. And then we've both saved some costs in terms of not having to hire an outside professional. But you build that network. It's not only for socializing, but just for also interacting with one another and helping each other save funds in retirement. Number 4, focus on your health. As we get closer to our expiration dates, we need to focus on our health. It's harder to stay healthy. It is harder to really kind of deal with all of the things that come up as we get older, aging. You know, this hurts or this doesn't move as far as it used to, or it's harder to get up out of a chair or whatever have you. Focus on your health, whatever it might be, you know, exercising more, you know, going and taking that class in aerobics or Zumba or whatever it might be, a cycling class, there, really focus on your health. With aging comes more aches and pains, and if we don't do everything we can to mitigate them, then they're just going to get harder and harder for us to deal with. Make plans to keep active and moving and exercising. It's just, you know, if you don't pay attention to that, it will come back and bite you in the behind. You've got to make sure that you're focused on your health. Number 5, prepare for the emotional impact of retiring. And I have a whole other video on this, which I will also link down below. But yeah, retiring can be an emotional wallop. You know, I talked about it before here, the folks that you interact with all the time. All of a sudden now you're not interacting with them on a regular basis. That whole support structure and social network and so on that you had, that you may have relied on for years, suddenly just, you know, vanishes, or at least, you know, dissipates into the wind. And it is hard sometimes for us to adjust to This is different. I no longer have, my person that I just interacted with every day for the last 5 years. And now I rarely see them or rarely talk to them anymore. It can be an emotional adjustment. Your life is going to change, and this is a very substantial one. Be ready for it. Your job does not define who you are, and you have to be ready to redefine yourself. For many years, people say, what do you do? Oh, I'm a manager, or I'm a, whatever you did, lead software engineer or whatever. And now you don't have that anymore, and oftentimes you go, what do you do? And people are kind of stunned. I have gotten very comfortable with telling people, I am retired. I do whatever I want to do. Kind of turn it around there a little bit. And that is very cool. But you've got to internalize that. You really have to believe that, yes, my job and what I did in some cases for 20, 30, 35 years and so on does not define who I am. Not in the slightest. You define who you are, and, retirement is just another phase of you being who you are. All right. And it's tradition on here. We had 5 tips, but I have a bonus tip here. Plan for travel. Also have a video on this. I'll link down below as well. Make plans to get out and visit places you did not have time to when you were working. My wife and I talked about this on here many times on this channel, took a 3-week retirement kickoff trip where we toured parts of Africa. We had never been able to do that while we were working, trying to coordinate vacation times between each of us. And I can't pick up and leave work for 3 weeks. I might be able to get a week off, maybe 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks and stuff. But, then there's just gonna be so much stuff sitting on my plate waiting for me to deal with when I come back. So, as you get ready to retire, now you have the time to do the things that you may have always wanted to do. So now, definitely. Many of us, now you may not have the travel bug, but many of us hey, I always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls or, see the Eiffel Tower in Paris or whatever it might be. Now is the time to to do that. And my other suggestion is to try and do those earlier in retirement rather than later. When you've just retired, and I think I've pointed out here before that I stole this, you are in the youth of your older years. You're going to have the most energy, things are going to hurt less, the least, and so on. Now is the time to go out there and do all the things that you want to do. As you get older, maybe say you retire at 60, 65, and so on, that's the time that you're going to hurt less, that you're going to have more energy to do things. If you wait time and now you're 80 and 85 years old, you'll be like, I don't have the energy, I don't have the viv, I don't have the desire to go do those things anymore because they're going to hurt. That backpacking through Machu Picchu might be a lot harder to do at 80 than it is at 60. All right, so that is what I wanted to cover today. Thank you so much, as always, for stopping by. I'll always ask if you can comment down below, what are the things that you are really happy that you learned of before retirement to help get you ready for retirement? Share below. I'd love to see what other people are having themselves exposed to. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe if you found this information resonates with you. I truly appreciate your stopping by. And as always, in Elita Times.